Hello, everybody. May I have your attention, please? Thank you so much for being here with me. My name is Kayla. I'm the instructional designer with CLT. I'm very happy to introduce today's presenter, Dr. Chad Wiener. Dr. Chad Wiener is a lecturer from the Philosophy and Religious Studies. And in today's presentation, he's going to discuss the distinct kind of service learning that can be cooperated into our classes. Chad is all yours.
I'm going to just hold the mic and see if this works. This looks good. So I'm going to talk today about a distinct kind of service learning that I teach. I'm going to often say we, which is confusing because I'm only one person up here, but I'm saying we. This is actually part of a project that I'm working with three other colleagues at three different institutions. I used to work at one of the institutions as a woman. For those of you who have not taught service learning before, I highly recommend it. Actually, before less than 3 years ago, I had never taught a service learning class. I was actually skeptical when I was asked to teach a service learning class. I was like, I'm not sure if I'll do this well. And I just jumped in and I did it. I was lucky that I was at an institution that I was already highly supported, but you'll see. But what I realized was the results I wanted out of teaching an ethics class at the university level was exactly what could be accomplished or better accomplished by this kind of class. So the paper we co-authored, Cultivating Citizenship, Student Design Civic Engagement Projects and Philosophy Classes. I'm going to talk a little bit about the paper, but I'm going to talk more about the kind of project because I think that's what people are interested in. So I'm a philosopher, so we always start from a problem. And what's the problem? Well, look, we have these standard goals of ethical courses. I think that's pretty universal, both in the United States and Europe. You know, we want to improve the reasoning and critical thinking skills of our students. We want to improve their writing skills. We want them to learn theoretical knowledge of ethical principles. And so, this sounds like a standard academic course. What's lacking? Well, I study ancient Greek philosophy, Plato and Aristotle primarily. So I turned to Aristotle here, and if you read Aristotle's Ethics, he says, well, what's the goal of ethics? It's not to contemplate or learn ethical principles. It's to become good. And I think this is kind of interesting when you think about it, because in our society, when you say become good, that could mean radically different things for different people. And so having a goal of making your students better human beings can be controversial. So we'll think about how this service learning project helps resolve that issue. So with this problem, it's like, how do we help students become good? Because we're teaching an academic class. We'll see the picture's different. I'll explain it in a second. So we think it's possible to also develop these skills in a philosophy class, in an ethics class. Ability to participate in civil dialogue. That's something that's really important in our society right now. I think motivated engagement. We want our students to leave the classroom wanting to continue to do projects in their community. We want to teach empathy, which is not easy to do. We want to teach students respect, how to respect different people in their own society as well as respect different cultures that they may be interacting with. And you want students to recognize their own agency. Now, like I said, 3 years ago, I never taught a service learning class in my life, but I did teach a class in virtue ethics. I love teaching virtue ethics. In the foreground here is Nikki. She was one of my best students in a virtue ethics class. Her husband is in the background. They are on the island of Vanuatu, and they were in the Peace Corps on the island doing multiple different projects. And so, this is what I want out of my ethics classes. I want students to be able to, commit themselves to a community either they live into or they move to help improve the community. You may also think, since they just got hit by a cyclone, unfortunately, a couple months ago, my students actually were already off the island, which is good, but even better, the community that they helped, nobody was actually, I shouldn't say harmed, nobody was killed during the cyclone. I think that's really important. And I just want to give a reference to Nadine Cruz. I think it has a lot to do with this knowledge that these communities have. As communities, they've been dealing with cyclones for their entire existence on this island, so they know how to deal with them. And so it's really neat. The other thing is just for us to recognize differences of culture and technology. My students who were already back in the States, it took them 5 to 6 days to hear whether their their families were safe and sound. They actually got global picture. They got pictures of the surface of their island before they actually heard the news, which did not help when they were waiting, but they were safe and sound. So how do we accomplish these goals? Well, this is a student design civic engagement projects. This was my colleague at Pacific University, Ramona Aaliyah. She helped design these specific kinds of projects. We'll see they're a little bit different than what we've been hearing about. So the project we ask students to complete a project they identify and plan themselves that makes a positive difference for an issue or a community that they care about, right? So the students are doing most of the motivation here. We're asking them to do a lot of the work here, but I'll talk about what I do in a service learning. This is an issue, although I think with a lot of the stuff I've already heard today and yesterday, this is less of an issue. We like to think of this as something more than service learning, so this is a definition I stole from Emily, who got it from the National Service Learning Clearinghouse. Service learning is a teaching and learning strategy that integrates meaningful community service with instruction and reflection to enrich learning experience, teach civic responsibility, and strengthen communities. Now, this is exactly what we want to do, but I think where we differ is this idea of meaningful community service. What we're trying to do is really make it meaningful for the students as well as for the communities. So we'll see how we accomplish this task. So when you engage in service learning, there are some pitfalls. We've discussed some of these. Who's motivating the project? A lot of these classes, the professor has picked the project, and a lot of times the students are on board, but sometimes they may not be on board. Of course, you're requiring service learning in the classroom as part of their grade. Of course, we require other things as their grade, but they may not actually care or like the project. Now, the good thing about the students, the professor and instructor is that it might change students' minds, which is good, but we'll come back to that. But another issue is like, who's the community, right? Who's the community you're helping? The instructor has already picked whose community you're going to be helping, and that might come into some tension with some students, right? Are the students going to be engaged in the community? What type of service learning are they going to be doing? And are they doing meaningful work? This is the thing we always really want to stress if we're going to do service learning. We want our students to do meaningful work. And so the issue is, how do we move from, I know it's a little loaded, I found some pictures on the internet, but we don't want students to volunteer for a group and they mainly do paperwork. What we want is, and this is before I did service learning, but you'll see some of the projects. This is my student Peter in Vanuatu teaching at a local school. We want our students doing the activity of community service. We want them in the mixture. So here's a sample project. These two students raised money for Alex's Lemonade Stand. They planned and executed an art auction for Alex's Lemonade Stand. They collected 25 pieces of art, almost all of them within the last 2.5 or 3 weeks before the art auction actually happened. So there was a little bit of stress involved, but they overcame it. And they raised over I think about $625. Now this is really interesting because, so the question, I'll come back to this, but what did I do in this? Because I am the instructor here. Well, I meet with every student or every group of students for at least 15 minutes, and they come and either they have no idea what they're going to do, and it's a long, painful process, which I'll talk about later on, or it's like these students, they came in and they say, we want to do an art auction for Alex's Lemonade Stand. I didn't know what Alex's Lemonade, does anyone know what Alex's Lemonade Stand? Okay, a handful. Well, I didn't know what Alex's Lemonade Stand is. I was probably in my office, so we just Googled it. It's a charitable organization to raise money to study childhood cancers because unfortunately, probably it's the number of childhood cancers. It's the least funded cancer research in the United States. And so the Alex's Lemonade Stand is trying to change that. These students were obviously interested in that. And so that was the project they wanted to do. So what did I help? I helped brainstorm, I helped plan. They were very ambitious students. They wanted to get art from art galleries. And I was like, you could try that. That's nice. But art galleries try to make money. and I don't know how many of them actually do make money. So I was like, I kept pushing. I was like, go to a high school art class, go to an art class at Pacific University, go to an art class at Portland State, find seniors that are doing art projects that might want to get their art sold. And eventually they did that, and that's how they ended up getting 25 pieces of art. So this is what I'm there for. I'm for encouragement. I'm there for support. I'm helping brainstorm constantly, and I'm problem solving. Like they send me an email 3 weeks before their art auction and they go, we have one piece of art. And I thought, oh, this is gonna go terrible. And so I actually got, my wife's an artist, so she donated a piece of artwork that actually sold. I got a good friend of mine to donate a piece of art. It didn't sold, but he ended up donating it to the philosophy department, so they really like me now because they have something aesthetically pleasing in their offices. But you know, everything worked out and they ended up collecting a lot of students. But the emphasis here is that the students do the project. So this is the important thing. I'm sort of the background here and the students do the work. I mean, it's constant interaction though. I mean, I'm finding updates about these students sometimes on a weekly basis if they're very, very nervous, agitated students, and sometimes the slackers, you hear from them about, you know, 4 weeks left of the term. Now, this has not been discussed a lot, so I want to spend a little bit of time with it. At Pacific University, all of our civic engagement courses had peer mentors. This is one of my favorite peer mentors. She just graduated from Pacific University and got an award, most significant contribution to the Center for Gender Equity here. So they basically mirror you, but they're a peer. So they meet with the students. They meet with the students after me. So I've already done some initial planning with the students. So they have some groundwork to work with. I think that works really well. Because they're a student who did a previous project, they're a source of inspiration. They can talk about their project, but they're also there to brainstorm, problem solve. And the most important thing is that they actually know the resources on that campus. And so this is stuff that we have to develop here at ODU. What kind of resources do we want distributed to service learning classes? But the idea here is that they're a peer mentor. I mean, I'm the instructor. I make them nervous, but a student makes them a lot less nervous, and it's much more engaging. It's also an extra opportunity for them to bounce some ideas off of a person. So part of my talk wants to be about, you know, what is this actually accomplishing in terms of pedagogy, right? So we want our students to learn ethical theories, but what we want to do is them to use them in their everyday lives. So here, the project's asking them to see a social injustice, see a social problem, and see if they can affect some change about it. Design and how do we accomplish that through the civic engagement project? We ask them to design and initiate their own project. So they have to use the philosophy to see the social issue. This is sort of required of the project of like what, and it doesn't have to be a single ethical theory. They can use multiple ethical theories to think about what's the problem here and what am I contributing to thinking through and helping the problem. And it helps them connect the class material to issues students are passionate about. In my experience, I taught this class 4 times over 2 years, and I would say 90% of the time, the philosophies that the students used to integrate with their projects were the ones they understood best. I mean, I didn't do any official survey of that, but that was sort of the response I would see on the papers and on the final exam. And that's really important because if you've ever taken a philosophy class or if you took a philosophy class like 20, 30 years ago, you may not remember much of anything. And so getting them to remember something from the class, I think, is vitally important. Learning critical reasoning skills. But here, what we're going to do is apply them in a specific context, a specific problem that they're thinking through. And so they're going to execute a project in the community. Now, the Alex Lemonade stand, it ended up being community-based because they got art from a variety of people, and then they opened it up to the public, although Pacific University held the event. So we have multiple communities coming together for that project. And then the other question is, how do we help produce empathy, respect for others, and motivated engagement? And this is through the commitment students have to their own project. I think this is an interesting psychological thing. When students are actually producing something that's not a paper, that's not an assignment that we just look at and grade, they're producing something that exists in the world, although papers exist in the world, but in a different way. You know, they're producing something that exists in the world, they all of a sudden are going to own that project. They want that project to be good. It is about the grade, but it also is really about the project being good. And I think this is a experience. So, okay, I have a couple minutes. I'm going to talk a little bit about the effectiveness of the teacher because teaching because I think this is important and this is what our paper is about. But I also want to show some of the projects that were done so you'll see the range of them. So what we wanted to do was see whether students improve their philosophical skills, their critical reasoning skills, recognizing arguments, communication skills. These are articulating their own ideas as well as others because that's very important. Articulating other people's ideas. Citizenship skills such as agency, motivation, and practical skills like time management and things like that. Now, I'll go through this really quickly, but we had pre and post course surveys. It asked for both quantitative and qualitative data. The questions were in those 4 areas. And because it was, we had to do it all within a term, we did it within the first week or second week of class and then at the end of the term. They also had a reflective piece, as we've talked about. A lot of service learning engages in reflection, so they had a final reflection sheet about their own project, which compared their actual experience with the stated objectives of the class. Sometimes they met them, sometimes they didn't. And then 2 of us read these looking for patterns in the paper. And we also looked for criticism of the projects. And then we also compared them to traditional course evaluations. So really quick, this is actually not the survey. This is a scheme of the survey, so you can see how in-depth the survey was that we asked of our students. What does our average student look like? Well, in some sense, it looks a lot like what you see. They're not necessarily activists. They're not necessarily consider themselves involved in their community. About 68% of them gave themselves between 1 and 3 out of 6 in terms of their involvement in the community, which changed pretty dramatically. And most of them were taking it either as a gen ed requirement or they were actually interested in ethics. So what kind of projects did we see? Although I usually don't allow this category, just simply volunteering for an existing group, other people in our group did try to advocate a self-designed project within an existing group or just a self-designed project in general. Here is a different way to break it up. About 70% of them were service-oriented and 13% targeted systematic change. These are sort of categories that Nadine brought out, that 70% of these people were the people who wanted to work one-on-one with people, and 13% were interested in making some kind of change, sometimes one-on-one and sometimes larger. Now, here are some results. What we like about the results is that they're almost always increasing. Unfortunately, though, because we were doing statistics, the p-value tells us the statistical significance of our analysis, and what 0.5 means is that it's not statistically significant, but the sample size was actually very low. But we did get good results on critical thinking, but what we're really proud of, is this microphone better? Okay. Hello? Is that better? So what we really liked was look at the second category, stated other people's values and perspective. That was actually statistically significant, and you can see what kind of jump was made by these students doing that project. So we're very happy with that result. What we were surprised about is that actually we had very little change in practical skills, although the numbers go up, they go up a minor amount. I think this is in part students actually overestimating their skills at the beginning and actually underestimating how much they actually changed in the project, because the verbal responses to me were very different than what they published. And then last but not least, we see here we approach statistical significance in improving the community and see myself as someone who brings about change. So this is a pilot study. It's a small sample, but we hope to increase it. Really quick, this is stuff you want to see. 46% of the students reported that their project had a strong positive effect on them. 96% reported that it had a positive effect on them. So think about giving out an assignment where students tell you it has a positive impact on them. That's a kind of interesting result. This is another, 74% changed their mind about an issue, which is exactly what we want to do as instructors. We want them to see the world differently. This is coming about through this project. I'm a little skeptical of these numbers. They reported that they'll continue their project, but I think a lot of them will continue the project in that area. And about once again, 3/4 of the students say they're going to be more active, which is what we like. And then 74% said they learned more in this course than the others, but you always have the naysayers. 9% told us that they learned less. But I mean, I think in the end, you're always going to have naysayers. You're not going to have 100% people are like, yay, this is great. Once again, we did, this is data from the final reflection. I don't want to go over it too much, except that, look, what students had, they had insights in how they can affect the community around them. So I think that's really important. There was a lack of criticism of the assignment, both in the data we collected as well as in our course evaluations, where your students can just have at you free will. They didn't complain. And a lot of the disappointment was actually personal. It was like that they didn't do enough for their project. Not that they thought badly of the project, but that they actually didn't do enough. Like we said, there's some shortcomings. There's no control group. We hope to change that in the future. Small sample size. There's always a selection bias. The question is, and this is hopefully what I can add by coming to ODU, most of the colleges are liberal arts colleges, so you're getting a small liberal arts college student. Here at ODU, we'll have a very diverse student population, so we can see that issue, whether that comes away, and we can't corroborate. One thing that I want to say is the shortcoming about these projects in general, the way we conceive of them, is that there isn't necessarily developed community partners. That doesn't mean it can't happen, but like I said, we can't guarantee that the next term students will do similar projects because we let them pick their own projects. Now at Pacific, they had a significant number of community partners that we could work with, but none of them were expecting significant number of students from our class, so they were excited to get them. So it worked out really well. I'm actually going to skip the conclusion. You can kind of tell it's all a happy ending because what you really want to see are the projects. I think what you want to see is the project. So this student, these are all my students. This student in Oregon at the time and probably still now, you cut the budget. So what goes? PE, art. That's what music. Those are the easiest people to fire and get rid of, and then you solve some of your budget problems. So this student decided that he would bring art education to elementary school. He worked in an elementary school that they fired their art teacher, so he was solely the art for that elementary school for that term. He actually found a bunch of materials to work with at the school that were just sitting in a closet somewhere. It was kind of funny. And this tree is a group project he accomplished with multiple classes where each student, as you can see, designed their own leaf the way they wanted to. They put it up on a tree. Students were very happy. I mean, I think it's a pretty interesting project, very important. This project is very interesting. So I don't know if Nadine's still here. She talked a lot about colonialism. This project actually has to do with colonialism. So Pacific University was originally, I forget what denomination school, but the Pacific Northwest is full of Native Americans. So when Pacific University was started, what they did was we'll educate the Native Americans. But what's the price they had to pay? Everyone knows they had to convert to Christianity, right? So this is the Chemawa school that existed in Pacific University about 130 years ago. It went defunct, and now the Native Americans resurrected themselves, and I had a student who came from this school, and so what she wanted to do was learn about the connection between the Chemawa school and Pacific University, both past and present. She was a freshman. She worked in the archives. She taught not just one class period, but she taught a whole class period, an anthropology class as a freshman about the Chemawa school. And I haven't kept in touch with her that much lately, but she's a student I think that will continue this project. It's about her identity, and it's about creating a community between Chemawa and Pacific University now. So very interesting project. So when I talked about meeting with students and just getting blank stares from them, this student, I met with him 3 times before he had an epiphany. Like, what do you like? Sports. Okay, what can you do with that? I don't know. What else do you like? The second meeting, what else do you like? I like filming. Okay, what can you do with that? I don't know. Third meeting, finally had the epiphany. He wanted to make a video about the average life of a student athlete at Pacific University. They just integrated a new football team, et cetera, et cetera. And so what he did, he made a 12-minute video interviewing different student athletes about their experience being a student and an athlete. Not just being an athlete, not just being a student, but how they integrated both in their livelihoods. And the University Athletic Association was very excited. They thought, we'll show this film to incoming freshmen. So it didn't get outside the Pacific community, but this student was, I'd call him a slacker, just pulling teeth, but he pulled off a very good project. It was a very impressive video. He had those skills and he used them. This also, this project made me think of Nadine because this project was very interesting. This was student, this is also in the Pacific Northwest, which is like full of no religion whatsoever. But this student was religious. And what did she want to do? She wanted to teach art in Sunday school. She wanted to figure out how to do that. So she invented her own curriculum of how to teach art at a Sunday school. So she designed and literally taught an art curriculum for about 10 weeks at a local church. And she taught the following skills. She wanted to, and these are her own words, she wanted to incorporate these skills in her lessons: confidence, personal creative expression, verbal and nonverbal communication. And these are like 3rd and 4th grade students at a Sunday school. So I really liked her project. This is the idea that, look, since the student is designing the project, the student is motivating the project. And if the student's motivating the project, I don't think you're imposing a certain framework of what good is to that student. Of course, you might poo-poo a couple projects, but of course you can always work with them to figure out what they want to do. And really quick, I'll open up for questions, but look, these are other projects. I could go on and on. I had students build two of those lending libraries. Unfortunately, they built them on campus. I tried to get them in the Hispanic community where they'd need them, but it's permits and stuff like that. That became complimented. I got an elementary student, a student worked, she wanted to work with deaf kids, so she worked with deaf kids at elementary school, and she got them to make care packages for military soldiers. Those students were very excited about doing that project, probably more than she was at times. Another student of mine, he was a good student. He wanted to do things for the homosexual community, the LBG community. That didn't work out, but then 2 students passed away who were actually African. They're from Somalia, and he was African American. He ended up doing and organizing a way for students to mourn their passing, do a fundraiser for the family. It was a very amazing project that came out of the blue, so sometimes that happens. This was an unfortunate one, but an impressive display of creativity. I had multiple students work in a permaculture farm, which I really liked. Another set of students made flyers in Spanish telling Hispanics about their Miranda rights in the United States of America so they understand what to do. Oh, I threw that up there because it's fun. Drag queen. I literally had a student who brought a drag queen show to campus, and that was fun. Anyways, I'll open it up to questions because I'm out of time. As you can see, the projects are very diverse and they fit the students' interests. Sometimes they actually can't really look at. Questions? Nicole?
I was just curious, how many students did you have in your classes?
So I had about an average of about 25 to 30 a term. There was one term I had 33. There was one term I had 24. So I had roughly about 110, 120 students over a 2-year period, and probably about 70 to 80 different projects, roughly, somewhere around there. But they did most of the work, so it's work, but they did the work, so it's nice. Mark.
Right. How much of your course time did you dedicate to doing this service project, as opposed to everything else you taught?
Okay, good. The course actually has like less work that I would normally assign to an average philosophy class. But most of the class, I allowed students to miss class for their project. They would have to get permission from me, but that's excusable. But because everybody's doing individual projects, it doesn't really, most people are not doing their project during class time. So you would still have traditional lectures. But what would be different about this class than an ethics class is I spend about three weeks on nuts and bolts of the projects, as well as like understanding what service learning is, what civic engagement is. Like we read the letter from Birmingham Jail. I tell them, you don't have to go that extreme in terms of your civic engagement project, but if you want to, go for it, right? But you got to be careful with what you advocate. But we read that letter from Birmingham Jail, and that really gets them to understand like, this is why community involvement is important, and this is one way it looks like. Yes.
Would you say that a majority of your students came from a culture of volunteerism?
No. Well, yes and no. I think when we say a culture of volunteerism, I think now at these better high schools in the United States of America, they're very much, volunteer for this organization, do that kind of certain organization. They do come from a more privileged background, so it'll be interesting to see what kind of projects come out of ODU students. I'll be starting this class in the spring, and I'm told that I'm out of time. But some things really quick. Where's my clicker? So just to plug. Backwards. So this is a website, engagephilosophy.com. You can find out lots of information about projects, what it's about, the different projects, the colleges, resources, syllabi, all of that stuff is up there. I'll let people take pictures. This has become a new thing. My students walk up at the end of class and take a picture of the blackboard. I'm like, okay. I guess that's a new way of taking notes. It's fine with me. And then I thank my mentors, my co-authors are up there, and my email is down there at the bottom. But thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.